You don't read anymore to strip authors, but to steal away from yourself. You aim at this deculturation in every direction: science fiction, underground cinema, linguistics and singular logics, monsters of plastic and sound, surprising banalities, oblique rereadings. You are unfaithful in your alliances like the barbarians of Clastres, but for a different reason, opposite at least. And you know that with all this, you're probably only perpetuating Western philosophy, its laborious libertinage and its obliging equanimity. At least you also know that the only chance or mischance to do so lies in setting philosophy beside itself. We might name this process, with a word dear to Lyotard, as dénouement, laying bare. He describes it more graphically here as a form of internal war, undertaken on the chance that he might thereby displace philosophy itself, which he had now understood to be the horizon of politics as he had practiced it to that point as a militant and as a philosopher. He won't say it in this essay, and perhaps he could not yet say it, but it is apparent from his later work that he was preparing in thought for what he would call the event. I will come back to this point, but I want to make the transition now to what I proposed in my book entitled The Claim of Language, in which I am convinced could well be described as offering a pedagogy of disaster. I don't want to rehearse the argument for the sake of some retrospective justification, but I do want to assume it again, because in effect this conference makes me look at it afresh. And in returning to Lyotard's essay on endurance, I realized that I wrote this little book on the humanities in comparable conditions. In a state approaching despair, I was seeking to bear witness to what had become the bankruptcy of the institutions that had formed my intellectual life, and the painful abstraction of the political context in which I was seeking to find a place. Too unsure to say openly that my thinking had led me to question any political construction, in currently available terms, of the act of teaching, I sought to describe a practice of thought and teaching that could not be without political effects, because it meant becoming what Deleuze and Foucault described as a local intellectual, but would eschew determinate political ends in a necessarily obscure effort to push to the extreme what I understood to be the essence of work in the humanities. I use essence, quotation marks. In a state of perceived disaster at the institutional and political level, I was pushing toward the disaster at the limits of reason that I had glimpsed in the work of Blanchot and Lacan. My thesis in The Claim of Language, and this is, I'm going to, for about a page